Alright, in this video we're going to be making this shape that you see here, and if you take a look at all the different reference, it's kind of, if you took a sphere, divided it in half, and then kind of intersected that sphere with this part, that's kind of what we got going on here. Something else to note is that it feels like if you take this edge and continue it off, it kind of sweeps into here, just like that, and if you take this edge kind of right in through here, it kind of goes to that top part here. Also, there's a little notch that's kind of cut out right here in this section, and then we've got all these other kind of smaller visual details and things like that. So my plan of attack for this one is going to be a little bit different. Instead of using just Maya for this, I was going to make some shapes in Maya, push that over to Zbrush, and then use their live Boolean system to do some Boolean information on here. So we'll go through all this and take a look at it. Let's go into Maya right now, and let's go ahead and make our first shape, and we'll go ahead and say create polygon primitives. Normally I'm not a big fan of their sphere just because it has these different poles on here. Let's go ahead and create it. I'll put it down the Z axis this way for the poles. I'll hit apply for that, and you can see if we scale this up, I'm just going to tap R for that. Here's their sphere that they have for this, right? We can go into the channel box. We can change some of the different options for this. We could do the subdivision axis. We could do like 32 for that, and then height. If we did something like 16, then we've got something kind of going on that represents this here. And I think that's going to work pretty good. The next thing we can do is go ahead and take our sphere and snap it to the center of this right here. So if we turn on our wireframe unshaded, you can see this is the center line for all this right in through here, or we could use this center of this object right there. So we can just hold down V and move it, and we could snap it to either like this point here, or we could snap it to that point. Doesn't really matter. I think it's going to be a little easier to kind of snap this in through there like that, and then kind of scale this thing down. And again, what was going on was if we move this thing forward, this this edge should be kind of flush with this edge right here. So I'm gonna hold down V and then move it right to here like that. And again, the geometry from this should feel kind of like it flows out from here, it hits that point. We've got that, and we've got this here. So I might not have built my geometry exactly correct to where this is perfect on here. Actually, it's supposed to be this line here is where it kind of flows into, is right about there, somewhere in that vicinity, right there like that. And the other part is if we're going to get rid of some of this. So if we hit F10, I'm just going to delete all the edges off to the side here and get half this sphere. This will help us kind of look at what we've got going on for the shape of this, because the other thing about this object is I don't think this is a perfect sphere. What they're kind of doing is if you take this object and you move it somewhat close to the edge here, if I'm taking a look at the reference that we've got, it doesn't really stick out too much further than about here. So knowing that, if I take my pivot point and if I put on scale, tap R, then I can tap D to move my pivot point, hold down V, I can snap it right to this point right here. Let's try to get in closer to this. It's having trouble. I just want to snap it right there, and then I'll tap D to release my pivot. And now I can scale this up and get this closer to what I was talking about right in through there for something like this. And it does feel like it's quite a bit larger through here. So we're getting close. I'll go to the side view, tap 5, just check this out, and I'll keep scaling this up to where it feels like we're getting closer to intersecting with that correctly. And let's just make it a little bit larger and through here, like that. Okay, so the next thing I could potentially do is maybe just pull this out just a little bit. Maybe I can get, I want to see if I can see this piece of geometry. I know I can take this piece here, and what I can do is kind of slice through the object at that point. But I want to keep all this geo kind of coming back to here. So this is going to be a kind of a difficult shape. I'm going to hit Control Alt Shift D, sorry, delete the history on that, and say modify freeze transformations. And then we can do a Boolean on this. So we can go create polygon primitives, and we'll do a cube and scale that cube up. And I'm going to move it right back and through here like this, and try to get it to where it kind of matches a little bit of this angle that we've got going on here. And we'll rotate this a little bit more and then move it out somewhere about there. So let's just take these both. I'm going to hold down that and hit Control 1 to do isolate select, or we can go to show isolate select there and do the view selected. And then now let's do this. I'm going to do a Boolean, select this, shift select that, and then just do mesh Boolean, do a difference, and that'll give us this chunk that we see here. Delete the history on it. I don't need this up here. I'll go ahead and select those faces, get rid of it. And then now we've got a shape that we can start kind of playing around with. So I think it might be easier to kind of just clean this up just a bit. So if we do something like this and hit F9, or we could right click over there and say vertices, select that. I'm going to shift right click. No, merge vertices. I'll use the target weld and just click and drag that up to that part. We'll fix some of the shading issues that you see here in just a second. So I'm trying to make, if I can, I'm going to try to make these into quads. I'm going to leave that for a second. I'll show you why. I think it's going to be easier to just merge some of those together. They're really close. So I kind of want a point between here and here. So if I select this and this, and shift right click, say merge vertices to center, then I get that center point, and then now I can do target weld, and I'm kind of getting the average of those two instead of moving anything. So I'll select those two and merge vertices to center on that, and then maybe I'd take this and move it over just a little bit like that. And so now I've got a shape like this. I'm going to delete history, Alt Shift D, and then hit Control 1 to bring everything back. And just taking a look at this, now I know I have a little bit of a gap in between here. Now looking at their object, it does look like they've got some parts of this that were kind of extruded in just a little bit, so we can kind of cheat that a little. And let's do this. I'm going to move my pivot point, move it here, kind of like this, and then scale it in just ever so slightly like that. This should be really close to this edge on here, looking at the reference, and I think that's good. So I'm going to go modify freeze transformations like that, and then I'm going to take this back face that we see here like that and just extrude it in a bit. So shift right click, say extrude face, take it off of local mode and put it into world translation, and just push back slightly like that. I can do a little bit of an offset as well, holding down Control. So I'm just kind of like growing that out at a slight angle. And now I can hit Control 1, do the isolate select thing. Now when I did that offset, I know if I look from the side, it's gonna not be completely flush with this. You can see it kind of grows this thing out. So I want this to be flush. I'll move this, hold down V and just snap to that point there, and hold down V and just use this axis and snap there like that. And so then that gives us this new geometry that we can kind of play around with. We could tap 3 and just see what's going on with that shape. It's not too bad, so we'd have to do a little bit of work to kind of fix this up. So we could use like the multi-cut tool, shift right click, multi-cut, and we'll just go in through here. It's going to hold down control and shift to try to go straight across from there, and then go to the back like this. Once we create this geometry, it should be easy for us to kind of wrap that all the way around. Like this. And I think I'll just go ahead and do something like I'm just going to leave that for just a second. I'll grow this across here. Because we'll see what kind of pattern we end up with on the back of this. And might just go across here. Now we got a piece of geometry here and here like that. That is a quad there. I could run this across like this. And let's go here. Just like that. Let's tap 3 real quick just to see what's kind of going on with this. And I got a little bit of extra geo here. Select the vert, get rid of it. And so I would like to hold this edge here along this outer part. So I'll select all this, just do a quick extrusion, shift right click, extrude face, and then do an offset of that. And that should start to harden that up a little bit for us. Now that we got geometry running all the way across this thing in here, we could just use the multi-cut tool, shift right click, multi-cut tool, hold down control, and then I could add a support edge right in through there. And I didn't notice this. When I did this, I actually accidentally selected a face there. We'll clean that up in just 1 second. So I'll hold that edge right about there, and then this, I accidentally select this. I'll select these edges and just delete them. That should get rid of that. Tap 3 for this. Now this is starting to hold in through here on the back. Now we need to hold something in through here. So we'll use the multi-cut tool, shift right click, hold down control, and we can add an edge, a support edge right there like that for this, and then we can do this as well. I'm going to select these faces. Let's see if I just select like this and grow out. So if I hold down shift and use the arrow key, which is the period key, I can kind of grow that selection out like that, and I think that looks good. Let's tap 4 because I didn't check before looking through the object. So now I can just shift right click, extrude the face, offset it slightly like this. Let's see what am I actually making here. Just want to make sure I'm not making any bad geometry. So yeah, I can do this offset. Now it's that geo that we made, it's coming in and folding in on itself, so we could just select these verts like this. I'm gonna select those and just tap F for my camera view. And I can merge vertices to center for that, and then hold these down and kind of snap right in through here. So I'll tap G for my last command, hold V, snap in through here, select those verts, tap G for my last command for weld together those points. Like that. Now we could do this, we could select all these, and if there's any verts that are really close together, we can shift right click, say merge vertices, change the options for this to be a higher threshold, and just take a look, that's too high, you see it, merge that together. So 0.025, let's try something like that. It looks like it grabbed those together. So that worked for that. Let's just take a look at these corners real quick. So I've got these faces, and I want to select the faces for this. I'm going to hold down shift and click up here. I want all this geometry to be flat, so I'm going to hit convert this to verts. So I select the faces, hit Control F9, and that'll do a conversion of selection. Now we can put on the move tool and hold down V and then move this forward and make sure all these points just snap up like that. Now let's tap 3 and take a look at the shape. I'm not super concerned about the geo and if it's super clean for some of this, because we're going to take this into Zbrush and just turn this into Dynamesh anyways. So let's take a look here though. I could potentially do this. Let's see if this looks any better. We'll do a multi-cut tool, come right in through here like this, and I don't know if that's going to be any, I don't think that's going to be any better. So I'll just leave that kind of like that and bring everything back and take a look at it, and looks like our geo that we made in through here, that can come out even a little bit further. So I'm going to go look down this right here like that. Hit F9, select in through here, kind of like that. I'm going to take this and just extrude the thickness a little bit. It's still has a gap on the bottom, and you can see that right down here. So I can just pull that through a little bit more like that, and all of our edges in through here. Let's see, I want to grab this. I just want these verts that we see here. Like that. And we're going to try to make this flush with this right and through here. So I'm just going to snap to this and tap 3, then take a look. Okay, something like that. Now again, there's going to be a little bit of a cutout shape right here, but we'll do that with the live Boolean inside of Zbrush. So we'll do that, and I'm just trying to look at this shape again. And I know what I could do is like pull this out using the soft select tool. So if I tap B and hold B and drag left or right, I can increase or decrease the soft select kind of size on here. And I'll just pull that out just a little bit and pull that forward just like that. And I'm going to put that AI standard shader on there just so I can see what this looks like shape wise with everything else. So I think that looks pretty good for our shape. So let's go ahead and save here. We're going to go ahead and hop on over to Zbrush, and we'll start making some shapes inside of there. So for this next part, I want to have a representation of this inside of Zbrush, but I want to have all the other pieces in there as well, so I can see exactly what it is that I'm modeling. I think it's time to start pushing this project over inside of Zbrush if I wanted to start doing additional things to it. So in order to do that, I could export everything out as an OBJ one at a time, but I've got a lot of different pieces. So I was going to use a script to do that, actually a Python script. So I found this script on High-End 3D, and you can download it as well. Just take a search for this mass OBJ exporter for Maya. And it is a Python script. I'll show you how to load that. You just go ahead and you need to log into High-End 3D, make an account if you don't have one, and then go ahead and download that as a Python script. And then you can just go and say like this, you can just go to the script editor, and if you don't see a Python tab that's down here, you can go to command, say new tab, say Python, and that'll load up that tab for you down there. And then you can say file load script, and then you need to locate the area where you save that script off of, and this is what is going to come in within here. So I've got a lot of different objects. I'm going to need to combine certain things together like this, so I'm going to do that offline so it doesn't take much time. But here's what you can see. I'll do something like this object here, and I will do this object here, so we can just show that we're doing some multiple objects like that, right? So you select the object you want to export, you do select all within this area, within the Python area, and hit Control Enter, and that will let you browse for a directory, so you can browse to where you want to export this thing out to. I already made it an OBJ folder, and just say choose directory, and you can say export selected. So as this thing exports out, you can see it's going to take the actual name that it says inside of Maya, and it's going to kick that thing out that way based off of the name. Let me do some joining of my pieces, and then I'll meet you over inside of Zbrush, and we'll look at how we can import all these objects in together. All right, now that all of the pieces are exported, I'm over inside of Zbrush, and I just started off with, if you hit the comma key, the lightbox should open up, and just went to projects and just chose this Dynamesh sphere. Not a big deal for that, but I just kind of like to start off with that project. It just sets up the grid for you and everything else like that, and kind of fills the screen. So I think that's kind of nice. So the next thing, we're going to be using Z plugin. So let's double click this to open up this area, and we can take our Z plugins, click this button, and drag it over here into this area. And we're going to be using Subtool Master. We're going to be using the multi-append, and this will allow us to select multiple objects. So let's go ahead and navigate to where our files are. You can see here are all the different pieces that were exported from Zbrush back here. And so I'm going to actually get rid of this mid one. That's the only one that I don't think I need. And I'm going to select everything else. Select this, hold on Shift, and then select everything else, and hit Open. And I'm going to tell Zbrush to use quads and triangles, and let's see what that hits. That usually means maybe there is an n-gon on there somewhere. Now, whenever it exports out of Maya, it's not going to export with the smooth mesh preview kind of level that's going on with things. So that's probably why I've got some different pieces that are not coming over correctly. So it looks like everything came over except for one piece in through here, and I might have to just export that out separately all by itself and then bring it in. But this is a way for you to get all your different pieces in and get them in rather quickly. So The next part is just, if you hold on Alt, you can click on any one of these pieces and it's going to select it within the subtool area. And then you can hit Control D, and that's going to add subdivision levels to things. So you're going to want to get everything back to the kind of place where it looks like with the smooth mesh preview. Now Zbrush doesn't do any smoothing on its polys, so in Maya, if you take like this shape and hit Control D 1-2 times, and that's what the smooth mesh preview levels at, but you can still see the polys on there, so you might have to do some additional divisions on there to get rid of any visibility for the polygons that are on here. So like what I'm finding is I need to up this to about 3 subdivision levels like that, and then everything feels like it's okay at that point. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these shapes and get my model all ready to go and make it all high res. Alright, I have all my shapes in order, and I actually even started to do the live Boolean here for this little notch that's kind of cut out. So it's pretty easy. You can just turn on this live Boolean piece that's right here. If you don't see that, maybe something's changed in your interface, but you want to do render Booleans. You want to turn that on and have that on there. I'm going to show you in the subtool area. I'm going to hold on Alt and click on this piece that I've got, and this is what we started with. To do any kind of Booleans, you want to start a chain and say, this is what I want to do some Booleans on. You click this little arrow and you'll push this in that start mode right there. And then that means from this piece and anything underneath of it, there's going to be some Boolean operations happening on that. But say we wanted to do some Boolean operations on this piece and it's lower in the stack, you would just hit that little start button. Then I went ahead and appended, I just went and I said append, and appended a sphere to this right through there. And if I have that sphere selected, I'll just go ahead and put it on the move tool, and I'll take it off of this mode here. This is actually cutting in. This is just a positive, and this is a subtractive element. And so just took the sphere and then used this manipulator to kind of scale this thing in using a manipulator here and kind of moving it into place. But if you do it with the cut enabled, you can actually see live what's going to be intersected and kind of cut away for this. So that can be a little bit tough at first. If you turn on the poly frame, you can turn on this visibility for line and fill. You can turn that on or off. And then that way you can kind of see this semi-transparent version of this. So I think that's going to work okay for that. I'm going to leave this shape the way that it is. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a kind of a line that comes straight down and through here like this. And so we're going to do kind of a cutout for that, and then we'll look at how we can kind of use the live Boolean to our advantage to kind of work with this. So just like the sphere, I'm going to do this append, and then I'm going to append a cube. Actually, if I do an append, it'll throw it at the very bottom of the stack. If I want to have it show up right underneath here, I can do insert, and I can do that, and I'll do a cube 3D, and then that should put it right underneath this sphere that you got here. I'll put it on the move gizmo and make sure this turned on here. I can scale this thing up and then scale it to be nice and thin and through here like this. I think this is about the thickness that we want for this. And now I can just slide this thing forward, and I could turn this into a negative just to see where it intersects with this thing, just to make sure everything's kind of the way that I'm hoping for, about the right thickness and everything else like that. And so I think that looks pretty good. Let me go right here and maybe scale it in just a little bit more right in through there like that. Now it's possible to do the add. It's also possible to do the subtraction, and it's also possible to do a union. Or not a union, I'm sorry, like a difference between those different shapes. So it'll give you this shape here. What I'm going to do with this, I'm going to capture this outer part of this ring, and then I'm going to build a piece of geometry, and then I'm going to turn that into a piece of geometry that we're going to use to subtract just a little bit away from this. Okay, so in order to do this, I can actually show this right here and hide everything else except for the pieces that I want to affect, like this. Now if I come down and I go down to Boolean, I can actually do a make Boolean mesh. Now if I do that, it's going to throw it up here up into the top, and you can see it's going to call this U mesh like this. Let's turn on the polyframe for it. Let's take a look at this and turn on the line, and you can see what it generates. I don't want any of this inner piece stuff. I just want the outer part of that, so I can just hold down Control and Shift and click on that. It gives us polygroups for stuff, and that's nice and convenient. I don't want any of those inner parts, so I want to do a delete hidden. I've got this on my interface here. Anytime you see something on the interface, you should be able to hold down Control, and you can see where that's at. Let's see, it says that it's under button path, tool, geometry, delete hidden. So if we go there and go to geometry, and we go to modify topology, and we say delete hidden, we can delete those hidden parts. Okay. The other thing that I don't need the back part of this. Okay. And what I could do is just kind of slice through this. I've got a slice curve. Let me skip this until next restart. If you hold on Control and Shift and you click in here, you can get to the slice curve. That's where that sits. So now I'll just hold on Control Shift and drag out a line, and then just drag straight across. I'll go right about there and split it there. And let's go ahead and split this part right here. And I know it's cutting through the model in a weird way up there, but we're just going to join that together in just a second. So basically what I've done is isolated this part, so I can hold down Control and Shift and click on this, inverse that, just keep it holding down Control and Shift and clicking it, and it appears I got a part. Let's go like that. Let me see what I've got here. This purple part is still together, so I hit Control and Shift and just click in the open viewport. So I've got this. If I hold down Control and Shift and select it, I've got two pieces for this. This becomes a little bit difficult to see, so if we go to display properties, we can put it on double-sided, and now it's maybe a little bit easier to see what's going on. I need to get these separated out, and that's pretty easy to do. We go to polygroups and we can say auto groups. We just do that, and it's going to look at whatever's in an island. This is an island unto itself, and so is this, and so it'll make a polygroup for that. I've actually made a hotkey for that. I like to use Control-Shift-W for that, just because I use it all the time. So now I just don't need this back piece. So I can just select that, hold on Control-Shift, click it, and click it again. And now I can hit Control-W. That'll make a polygroup for that. And then we can use that whole delete hidden thing. So we'll go to Geometry, Modify Topology, and say delete hidden again. And that was just to get us this shape that you see here. Now that we have a shape, we can actually use Zremesher to build some better topology for us. So if we just put this at a target poly count of maybe, let's say 1,000 polys, and hit Zremesher, just hit the button, and you can see it's going to make a decent piece of topology for us. Okay. Now at that point, what I can do is I'm going to use the Z modeler tools, and I'm going to extrude this out. So if we do B for our brushes, and then go to Z for Z modeler, and then click here, we got the Z modeler brush. I'm not going to go into big description about this, but if you hover over faces, edges, or verts, and you hold down spacebar or right click, you're going to get different options. I'm going to hover over a face, hold down the spacebar. I want to use the Q mesh because that will allow me to extrude. Instead of doing a single poly, I want to do polygroup all. So it's going to extrude all these polygons out. So I'll just click and drag, kind of like this that you see here, and that's going to give me some thickness here. Now depending this, if we drag this direction, this is going to be some thickness that we have for going in. I could do that. I could extrude it in right now. We could save it for later. I think I'll be just fine if I kind of drag that in a little bit. I'll just drag it out just slightly. That way if I want to move it again, I can just go and drag another one out, and should be pretty easy for us to do. Okay, so now we got a shape that we can easily kind of take and use as a subtraction. Another thing you could do if you wanted to get fancy is if you hold your cursor over the edge and then hold down spacebar and you want to do bevel, and you can do edge loop complete, you could hold down the left mouse and drag on that, and you could actually bevel that edge just a little bit. Now if you tap D, you could turn on your temporary smooth mesh kind of preview dynamic subdivision levels on this, like that. And now we've got a shape that we can use to cut away. So we could use it, leave it at the name like this. We could go up to subtool. We could possibly rename the thing if we wanted, but I'm going to wait till we drop it in here to rename it. Okay, so I'm going to take it off this polyframe that we see here. I don't really even need this box shape anymore. So let's take it off this. Let's just put it as a add, and I'll just even hide that thing. And then now I'll click this sphere, show this one here. So let's hide everything except for this. Hold down Shift and hide everything else except for that part. And it looks like it's turning everything on because this is our start here, and so it's turning on visibility of everything down below that. That's fine. And I'll hide that. I'll go ahead and hit insert, and then we can do this piece that we just made like this, and then we'll make this a subtraction, and now you can kind of see how far this thing is actually digging into the model. Now it's possible that we could go to this if we solo it. I'm going to hit Alt S. That's my hotkey that I set for solo. You can turn that on or off, and you can see what we got here. It feels like it needs to go in a bit deeper in through here. So I'm going to hover my cursor over this thing right here for the face. I'm still on the Z modeler. Hold down spacebar. We're going to do Q mesh, and then this time I'm going to do polygroup island, because there is the same polygroup on both sides. I don't want to extrude both sides. I just want to extrude this one. So I can click and drag out just like this, and then hit Alt S or solo for this, and I can see exactly how far that thing is kind of cutting in. So you can see we've made some pretty nice geometry that's nice and clean. We can bring everything back. I'll just go here to start and hold down Shift and then click on there and bring everything back. I don't need this piece anymore. We've kind of just used it to do a job, so I can delete it, get rid of it like that. And I'll just call this, I'll rename it and call this line cut 01, because I'm going to be making some more versions of that. So that's a way that you can kind of get in there and get it nice and clean. If you hit this real quick, you can see this is all live. And if I want, I can hold down Alt and click on this. You can see it's kind of low res right now, and I can just add another subdivision level to it. So the whole live Boolean thing, what's really cool about it is you can see we can just update these kind of values just like that. Now, if I select this part, hold down Shift and then hide everything else, I'll show that cut, then this piece here. And now, if we want to make a new union mesh out of that, we can just go to here and say make Boolean Mesh, like that. It's going to throw it up in the top up here. And here's our new piece. If we take a look at the geometry that it created, you can see what it made. Now it's possible that we can turn this into just Dynamesh, and let's just do that. And let's take a look here real quick. If we take this and go to Dynamesh, we can start to play with the values on this. There is a plugin though that will allow us to give a specific target count. I do believe you're gonna have to download this one from their site and install it. But it's called Dynamesh Master. So if you go here, the cool thing about this is if you've got, you know, subdivision levels, things like that, it's going to get rid of that. But you can give it a poly count of how many polys you want this to be after you run this Dynamesh. So that comes in pretty handy. So I'll just do 1 million polys and then click Dynamesh for this part. And you can see it automatically kind of smooths it a little bit. But what I want to use is the polish that exists. Again, if I hold down Control, you can see button path tool deformers polish. So we can go to deformation and then just run polish without that little donut hole thing. I'll just do something like 4 or 5, right around there. And you can see that's going to give us a pretty nice look through there. And so I'll call this something like side sphere. Let's just call this side sphere left and then 2. And I'll drag this over here and then hit backspace like that. And then now we can go back to here and we can put this right down below. So I'm going to insert this again and then click this, and that becomes that shape that we have here. We'll turn everything else back on. Now you can turn off the visibility of that. I've got that shape in there, and you can kind of get an idea of what this thing is starting to look like. Let's turn this back on. And so you might have to do a little bit of managing of your pieces as far as visibility goes. If you want to keep them all within the same tool, you can see I've got tools in here that are hidden that were used before I combined them together and kind of did this polish function. Something else to note is that you could store some camera views if you wanted to save with your file. You can go to texture and go down to image plane and go open up reference views, and you can click on like a custom 1 or 2. Now the first time you do this, it's going to move the camera on you, and it's probably going to turn perspective off. So you just, before you set your camera view, just click this custom 1, let it do its thing, and then move it to where you want it to be. And then you can click store view, and then you could do another one for custom 2. You could do it for all these different cameras, and then it becomes something that you can kind of store. And then I'm just going to hit Shift R at that point and do a best possible render on here. And so then this project's starting to move forward and becoming a little bit better to look at. One other thing I could do to show you, when I imported this in, the scale was a bit big, so I had to go to draw and change my grid size to, I think, about 100. So let's see here, draw, grid size is down here below, and you can kind of see that changing interactively. So I changed that to 100, and then the elevation is set to -1 normally, and that'll just put the ground plane at the very bottom of your object. I changed that to -2 because I wanted it to feel like it was floating in the air just a little bit. Some other things I did for rendering, just go to render. If we open up render properties, I don't have AO turn on. I could turn that on, but I do have shadows turn on, and here's some things that I did for shadows. I just changed the settings of these just a little bit to kind of blur things, changed the strength of the floor shadow, and then changed the global strength of shadows altogether just a little bit. If you go to BPR AO, you might want to up this just a little bit. Also, I went and changed the V depth of the BPR shadows, put that to -4. That just gives a little bit more contrast to your shadow, so you don't get any kind of like muddiness kind of going over your whole object. And I think that's it for that. After everything is rendered, let's see if we got BPR render passes, and then we got BPR filters. So you could potentially turn on this. Let's just do a Shift R to do a render real quick, and I'll show you what this is. But basically, there's different filters on there. We can put a sharpen filter, and I did put a sharpen filter on there. I'm going to try turning on noise and seeing what that looks like with noise. So that's really strong. This means it's on. And noise, if I do something a little bit lower, this is about the grain of this thing. So you can do a really low kind of grain on here. And if it's too high for you, you can take the opacity and kind of drop that back a bit. So I just want to get just a little bit of noise on here. And then I also use the sharpen filter, so you can see what this looks like. If you do negative, then it's obviously going to do a blur. We could sharpen that up just a little bit like this, right around 70, I think is where I kind of like to put that. And then you can see you get a pretty nice look directly out of ZBrush just doing some of these quick renders.